sure that we continue this. So please feel free to reach out to us at any point if you have any questions. We'd love to hear some ideas about what topics you want. So today we're going to start our first one, and we are going to have our first speaker. So I'm going to pass it off to Heather Grant.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to introduce Zach Newman. He is the founder of the COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project, and he's the founder of the Community Firm. The Community Firm is a social enterprise law firm that provides free or low-cost legal services to working Americans facing eviction, debt collection, employer wage disputes, and parking and traffic tickets. In the late March of 2020, they launched the COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project to support community members facing displacement and homelessness due to the virus. Zach will be presenting for approximately 10 minutes and sharing what is happening related to housing. And if you could put your questions in the chat, and we will address them at the end of his presentation. So welcome, Zach.
Thank you, and thanks y'all for having me on. I appreciate the chance to be here with the COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project. And, you know, we're kind of a group of volunteer lawyers, economists, and data folks really trying to size the impact on housing of COVID-19. Have done a lot of research on the numbers and now kind of pivoting and trying to make sure we can provide people with counsel who are facing eviction or rent relief through a small rent relief fund we operate. But it's a really kind of crazy, challenging time in housing as it is, and basically I think all spaces right now. It's a strange moment in the world, but excited to talk through some of what we're seeing. So could we go to the next slide? So these are numbers we worked on with the Aspen Institute and published, gosh, a few months ago now. Time is like flying. But basically what you see in each state bubble is renters at risk of eviction. And when we say at risk of eviction, what we mean are people who may have rental arrears. And under Colorado law or under many states' laws, when you haven't paid all of your rent over a period of time, you become vulnerable to eviction. Doesn't mean your landlord is necessarily going to kick you out. You may work a deal. You may, find a way to catch up and make payment. You may move in with family. A lot of things happen when you're unable to pay your rent. But when we say at risk of eviction, we mean folks who may at some point be evictable. So the map on the page kind of captures those numbers, and you can kind of see those across the US. This is a really significant problem. Let's go to the next slide. So in our view, this is really significant in Colorado and is tied pretty closely to the unemployment rate. Depending on what you think the right unemployment scenario is, this could range anywhere from the low 200,000s to above 400,000. We've continually updated our model and kind of done testing. I think, fortunately, because the economy is recovering and people are coming back to work faster than we thought they would, you're seeing more folks on that kind of 200,000 to 300,000 scenario right now than the 400,000. But if COVID cases go up in December, if unemployment goes back up, there are a lot of unknowns. I think you would start to see this trend more towards the higher case scenario here. But whatever line you choose, I think the takeaway point is that there's a lot of housing instability in the community right now, and potentially a lot more coming as we move through the election, as you see a fall resurgence of COVID, if there are follow-on economic effects. And these are obviously hard to model, but they're out there. I would also say on this page, one thing that has slowed this down has been the presence of different types of moratoria. In the early summer, the governor had a very short moratorium in place on evictions. There was a window where evictions were kind of open for business again. And then recently in September, the Centers for Disease Control worked with the Trump administration to issue a fairly widespread eviction moratorium that requires tenants to fill out an affidavit, but if they do, they're protected through January 1st. So a lot going on in the policy space here to try to mitigate this, but I think the underlying instability remains. Let's go to the next page. So I'm probably preaching the choir here, but evictions really lead to some really bad stuff, right? It really, really, really negatively impacts people's credit scores. It's hard to re-rent is basically what that means. When you get evicted, finding a new home is tough. That's why you have prolonged homelessness. For students, children, and household, it dramatically impacts attendance and learning outcomes. If you don't have a stable place to live, it's really hard to do well in school. Of course, right? That's not surprising, and I think it's especially true during COVID-19, where school is at home, and so having internet, having a laptop or an iPad or something you can work off of in class, having a place where you can be all day that's warm, where you have food. I mean, these sound like such basic things, but eviction disrupts all of it. And then, of course, being really mobile also has negative impacts on health. I'm talking about the human element, of course, for pet owners and for kind of, folks who are focused on animal welfare, like this group. It obviously also impacts pets in that just in our client pool, a lot of people, when they become evicted or are evicted or displaced from their home, give up their pet. They turn it over to animal welfare. They give it to a family member. Sometimes they release it, but it's hard to kind of fight for survival and also care for a pet. Also, having a pet is expensive. Having an animal in your home or in your household is not a cheap thing, and so I also think it drives that form of displacement as well. Let's go to the next page. So the eviction crisis affects, certain parts of our community more than others. It disproportionately affects Black and Latinx renters and alternatively renters with children. And so, the numbers are on the page. This is from very recent survey data, but basically what you're seeing is folks who are unable to pay last month's rent in green, and then people who have slight or no confidence they can pay this month's rent in orange. And those are kind of broken down by background and family type, but these numbers are staggering. I mean, it's shocking that this many people feel that they can't pay their rent, or this many people weren't able to pay last month's rent on time. Doesn't mean they're not ultimately finding a way. People who are unable to pay their rent on time, in some cases, borrow money from a credit card, they borrow it from a family member, they sell a vehicle. But usually when someone is unable to pay their rent on time, there is real underlying economic distress, and there's something they have to do to catch up, and it's usually something that's not very fun. Let's go to the next page. We have solutions. There are things that make a difference. Having a lawyer can really help. It buys you time. It kind of protects your credit score depending on the outcome of the case. Rental aid can also be effective, although these don't go all the way, because ultimately when you have someone who has lost their job because of the virus and they're in an industry that is permanently impacted or long-term impacted by the virus, so hospitality, services, et cetera, it may be a while before they go back to work. And so this is not a short-term problem. And so short-term solutions like having representation or like having a couple of months of rent relief doesn't fully solve the problem. And the odds are that person is going to be back in the system or in need of that kind of assistance in the future. Go to the next page. And this is what I was talking about. So this is almost a financial problem. It's very rare that someone is being evicted because of lease violations or because the owner is selling. Most of these cases are non-payment. So really, at its core, this is an economic issue and demands economic solutions. And it, again, kind of in the spirit of intersecting this with animal welfare, it affects adults who live in household, it affects children, but it also affects pet ownership and the ability to kind of provide a stable place for an animal to live. And, again, often leads to people's animals being released or, other kind of negative outcomes you see, and there are a lot. So I'll stop there. That was kind of a quick sprint through our data. Hopefully no one has fallen asleep, but happy to answer any questions or talk about this more, just whatever's on y'all's mind.
So if anybody has a question, please place it in the chat and then we can address it. That was a
There's
great.
also like an awesome photo of a cat drinking coffee that like fits really well.
Hi, this is Amber with Ark Valley Humane Society, and we serve Chaffee County, Colorado, which is a pretty rural area in the middle of the state. And so far, we've not noticed an impact from evictions in our community. We haven't seen an increase in animals coming in. We're actually still seeing lower numbers than average.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, kind of question for the whole group, if other shelters, if other communities have actually started to experience increased intake, or at least a higher percentage of their intake as a result of housing instability, because we're kind of bracing for it, but we just haven't seen signs of it yet.
Maybe Heather, that's one that we could have, that's kind of about like, when will we start to see these evictions actually take place? Because I think someone else even asked that in the chat.
Yeah, so Zach, a question was, when do you expect to see, are there any predictions on when we will start to see these evictions?
It's hard to say. Again, I want to be clear about our terminology. We're saying at risk of eviction.
Okay.
So that means people who have not been able to pay their rent fully and on time, which generally leads to an eviction. The downstream behaviors and the downstream protections from that number are really unclear, right? So you have some situations where those folks, you know, the way we think about our analysis, don't get evicted because they move in with family, or they move to a cheaper place, or their landlord does a deal with them, or whatever. So this is a risk number, people who could be if their landlord wanted to pursue it. But I think more importantly, what we've seen is a series of extended protections. So over the summer, through the CARES Act, there was an eviction moratorium through the end of July, and then with the notice period required, another 30 days on top of that. So those filings really weren't set up to come in until early to mid-September. At the same time, you had overlapping state moratoria. And then just a few weeks after that, the CDC issued an additional moratoria. So for the vast majority of renters, they've been covered by some kind of prohibition on removing them from their housing since, gosh, April or May. And so these pieces of policy have really forestalled a lot of this. Now, what I think has been interesting is you have seen in the kind of non-eviction data and like displacement data or the moving data, a lot of these numbers out there. But it's coming in the form of people taking advantage of the moratorium to like move in with family or to find alternative housing. Those folks obviously still have a debt that's kind of hanging over their head, but it gives them a chance to maybe handle this in a more graceful way. Now, I think the interesting thing is what happens in January. Has the economy recovered enough such that this isn't really a problem anymore? People have gone back to work, they can pay again, so we've gotten through it. Or if you have like long-lasting economic problems from the disease, or the virus rather, and the moratoria have all expired. So very long-winded answer there, but you know, I think there's a lot going on here that has forestalled this.
Thank you. As for Amber's question, if you guys can make a note in the chat, that would be great, whether your organization is being affected. Another question was, how many people do you expect to regain housing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it, you know, depends on original displacement. I think I mean, there's a lot spun up, right? You've got a number of state programs now like POP and TRUA that can support people on rental payments. You have the moratoria in place. So the risk factors are really high, but I think across federal and state, you have a policy response that has been fairly effective. So our hope is that you don't need rehousing because these people who are at risk of eviction don't ever get evicted. Like hopefully these don't translate, these people who are at risk don't translate into real evictions because there are financial and legal solutions.
One other question, is there any upcoming legislation on the agenda that will protect renters?
Yeah, I think there are a number of bills this session. I think, this is not us, but groups are going to be running a late fee bill as they do every year. I think that's super important. I think you're going to see some interesting like due process legislation. I think there's going to be other stuff out there. We're a little more focused on the data and the legal representation, but I'm sure there will be a number of items in January.
Okay. Zach, in your opinion, do you have any thoughts on what we can do to help prevent surrender of pets?
That's a great question. I think ultimately, I mean, this is like a cash problem. Most people are really closely attached to their pets. Like the thought of having to, give up my dog and like a move is just, like really hard to contemplate. So I think people want to do everything they can to like keep these animals in their lives. But it's a question of money and stability. And so, I think if you do see this, one, supporting people financially so they can continue to care for their pet, but also even, and this is going to sound crazy, and you guys know this space better, so this may be wrong, but just having like temporary animal housing so someone can drop off their pet for 8 weeks and then come pick it up again when they've stabilized, I think can be really, really helpful because I think folks want to maintain that relationship. They just need that time to stabilize their life.
Okay. I think that was the only question. That's all the questions I had for you.
Amber has one more that.
Did I miss it?
Yeah, it's if somebody calls our shelter saying that they're going to get evicted, where should we refer them to get access to the affidavit process and form?
Oh, I got another one.
Great question. So, our project advises people on how to do that. And they can connect with us through our website, cedproject.org. The other place that you can do that is a great group called Colorado Legal Services. They're the best at this in the state, and most cities and counties have a CLS office nearby. And if you just call your like local CLS office, they can also help you fill out that affidavit. What's challenging right now in court is that you fill out the affidavit, you're not done. Generally speaking, folks are having to go to court to defend it, or at least file it with an answer in an eviction proceeding. And so it's all like a little bit messy.
And I did have one other one. Since the official eviction process is on hold, oh wait, maybe that might have been an answer. I'm sorry. Never mind, that was an answer for one of the other questions that was in the chat. Yeah, I think that's all the questions we have. If anybody has any, Zach, is there anything else you think we should know before we end this presentation with you or in your part?
No, I think it's, it's a fluid situation, but I do think there's a lot of room for hope. I mean, it's a hard moment, but it does seem like jobs are coming back, albeit slowly. There was, at least until yesterday, a lot of appetite for additional stimulus. I don't know if the president's comment was real or if that's like a strategic feint, but I do think in the next few months you'll be seeing more stimulus. And I think in general, we're like slowly getting there. So I've got a lot of hope. And I also now, having talked to you guys, going to check out this book in the chat. My Dog Always Eats First. That sounds super interesting. So no, nothing beyond that to add. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate the chance to talk with y'all. And if it's okay, can I just hang out and watch for a few minutes before I go?
Yeah. I will let, we're going to start breaking out into different groups. So I'll let Tiana take over.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much, Heather. And thanks, Zach. That was a really amazing presentation. I think it gave us a great foundation to have our breakout groups. So everyone, we are about to break out for about 20 minutes. Zach, you're welcome to join us in breakouts if you want to. We can toss you in a room, but that's totally up to you.
I made that comment not knowing breakouts were coming, so I will say
that.
goodbye and,
Okay.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we are, in just a minute here, everyone will get a prompt to enter a breakout room. I'm not sure how many of you have done this in Zoom before, but it will prompt you. It'll tell you you're invited to breakout room number 4 or whatever. So just click that you'll go there. And then in each room, we'll try to have someone from our FAWA collaboration committee, but if you don't have somebody, just select someone who can kind of help lead the conversation. Rachel's put up the questions that we're going to tackle, and really this is an opportunity, as Marissa mentioned, we want all of you to get to know each other, so please do some intros, some quick intros of who you are and where you work, and then let's dive into questions and start to share ideas of what we could do to support animals if this eviction, if these widespread evictions do end up happening, or in the future, kind of knowing that this is all kind of on a moratorium, what we're doing to help people who might need temporary help with their animals or are facing eviction. So the questions are, what is your current reality? Kind of what does it look like? Similar to what Amber's question was, what is your community looking like right now? What are you currently doing in this space? And then really just a brainstorm of what could we be doing and how could we collaborate? And then as a team, start to think about what your favorite idea is for your collaboration, because then we'll come back to this larger group. You'll also be prompted, it should give you like a 60-second countdown so you can finish up your conversations. And then you'll come back to this larger group and we'll share out some of our favorite ideas on how to collaborate. And then we will go from there. So I'm gonna have Rachel send us all into our breakouts now, and we'll see you all in about 20 minutes.
All right. Is everybody back? So quiet.
Back.
Okay. So, hey everybody. Hopefully you had a great breakout session. My name is Sarah Swanty, and I am the Executive Director for Animal Friends Alliance and currently serving on the CAFAWA Collaboration Committee. So hopefully everyone had as great of a conversation as I was fortunate enough to have with my group, and that you were able to answer our questions, do a little brainstorming. So we're going to take about 10 minutes, and we would just like each of our groups to present their favorite idea on how to collaborate. And I can go ahead and start just to get us kicked off. We had a really awesome conversation. We had an opportunity to meet people and organizations that we weren't previously aware of. So essentially what our best idea that we got out of this was that we just want to continue having conversations like this. This coffee chat's been such a great opportunity to meet other people in our field and learn about what others are doing. I did want to mention that we had a member of our breakout session just now, Ria from Longmont Humane, and it sounds like they have a successful temporary housing program. So I had asked Ria if she would share their SOP or materials around that program with me. If anyone else is interested, maybe put a little chat in now. So Ria, with your email, and Ria could maybe send it to everyone that's interested in that. So yeah, we definitely want to continue to have these conversations and hear what people are doing, what they're dealing with, and continue to look for ways to partner and support each other. So if someone else from the CAFAWA Collaboration Committee wants to report for their group, that would be great.
I can go. This is Lindsay Vigna again with HSPPR, and I'm also on the collaboration committee. Our group had a great conversation. We kind of just talked about everything, kind of what's going on and what's changed during COVID. In reference to the surrender, we kind of talked about some interesting ways that our group was dealing with reasons for surrender, specifically in regards to pet food. And up in the Western Slope, up in Rifle, Brittany actually talked about they have pet food available, like a pet food pantry kind of system in the grocery stores up there. And so that was something that we thought, was a really good idea. We also shared some information regarding a organization called Until They're Home. And just really good conversation. And that was, the group came up with, said, that they think the best way we can continue to collaborate is just like you said, Sarah, having these conversations and just, talking about the topics in animal welfare and what matters most.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Heather, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. So again, our organization really, or not our organization, our group was really happy with this event, and they really thought collaboration was a great thing, and it just gave us that opportunity to keep doing this. They did talk about, it would be great if we had a database where we could communicate and know what if the housing capacity at our organization started to get full. Could we reach out to another organization and they could utilize their foster homes, and maybe like a database that had that information in it. And like if I'm an organization that has only a foster home for small dogs and we're not utilizing them, but you need a foster home that you could use them. I did also bring up about that document that the collaboration committee put together, the Colorado Animal Welfare Resource Document, and a couple of them didn't know about that, and they jumped on and looked at it and said it was they were really happy about it, and it was a great document, and just keep pushing it and keep sharing it and getting it out there. So I think overall collaboration and continuing to work in the direction we're going is a great thing.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. I mentioned that document too to my group, and I think a couple people didn't know about it and were excited to hear about it. Rachel, do you want to report for your group?
I actually was not part of a group. There were enough other ones, so maybe Tiana could join us.
Sure, I can jump in. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks for organizing all those. Yeah, so I had Mariah from Animal Friends Alliance and Liz from Longmont in my group, and we had a really great conversation as well. One thing, it did come up as well that Longmont has a really successful program to help with temporary housing. So I think that maybe that's something that we can share out largely with the group, just to learn from what's already existing successfully. But we were talking about how we could all work together and how we could potentially use even for-profit organizations. They were saying that they try to target 2 weeks, and when Zach said 8 weeks was the ideal sometimes for people to get back on their feet, we were trying to think how could organizations like Camp Bow Wow or organizations that are already set up for boarding assist, and or how could foster-based organizations or other animal rescue or shelters and rescues step up to help fill in the gaps as needed with timing. So just being able to communicate with one another and understand what each other does.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiana. Marissa, do you want to report for your group?
Yeah, sure. I had Riri from Aspen Animal Shelter, Kai from Foothills, and I had Taylor from DFL. And I thought Connie brought up a really great point in terms of like, how can we create a space to have a deeper conversation with relinquishing patrons? I wrote aprons in the chat, but I meant relinquishing patrons. To really understand what is truly happening. So, you know, there are a lot of folks that are saying like moving or lost a job, and is there a way that we could get a little bit more information from them to understand like what other resources they might need, but doing so in a really non-judgmental, safe way, because not a lot of us have experienced, you know, specific impact from COVID and people saying I'm evicted because of COVID. So we're not getting that data, and it might be happening. And so is there a way that we could have a deeper conversation? I also put a few other ideas that we had talked about in the chat, just because I knew we were going to have a very short window. And some of them include just expanding our foster programs, and like everybody also said, understanding what we all do, and how we can collaborate and support one another through that. And speaking of the document that was shared and that lives on the CAFAWA resources page, there are a lot of organizations that are not represented on that document. So if your organization is on this call right now and you're learning about this document, please reach out to us, because we'd love to represent the resources and make this document be really reflective of what's going on in our state. So just a plug for the document.
Awesome. Thank you, Marissa. Did I miss anybody, or did we have an opportunity for each group to report? All right.
I'll just mention that, yeah, please feel free to just toss other stuff in the chat. We're going to share out the chat information afterwards, and it has links to the collaboration page that we discussed with that resource document, and a document where you can put your information so others can contact you. Sorry,
Awesome.
Sarah.
No, that's okay. So on that note, and we're like almost right on time, I'll go ahead and pass the torch to Lindsay for closing remarks.
Yeah, well, once again, thank you all for joining us. I think we had some really good, productive conversations. So stay tuned. As you can see on the screen, our next meeting we have planned is December 2nd at 8:30 in the morning. We're going to be talking about foster programs, tips for building and maximizing capacity within those. So again, just to reiterate, like Marissa stated earlier, if you have any ideas on topics you would like to see discussed, please reach out to us. And we thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Should we put all of our emails in the chat?
Let's put them in that document, and then people can reach
Okay.
out to us, and we'll just note that we're members of the committee.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.
Have a great day.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for
Yeah,
doing
this is awesome.
Bye, Kat.
Great.
Bye, Marissa.
Bye.